is remarkable. I will come on and address the specifics of the objections in due course.
Shaky.
I would
Is now joining.
I've said before that this is an application for a new license, but I would urge you not to necessarily think of it like that, because most of what we're applying for, we are already permitted to do. I have tried to set that out for you in a letter, which you'll find within our bundle of papers, which I think you said was going to be called Exhibit 5. And I hope you found that table and that letter useful. But it's perhaps easiest to look at the executive summary at the very foot of that table, because that sets out the key differences between the license we currently hold and the license we are applying for. And I thought I would just set those out for you. The key differences are as follows. In the basement of the premises, which is a live music venue and a members cocktail lounge, we're asking for an extra hour of operation on Thursdays, Fridays and Saturdays. On the ground floor, which is a public facing restaurant with a restaurant condition, we are doing no more than tidying up the license and in fact removing lots of licensable activities from that area that we just don't simply use. The first floor of the premises is another lounge area, and we are asking to increase the hours there. The second floor of this premises is very sparingly used as a private dining room for VIPs, and we are asking to use that for an additional 30 minutes on a Thursday, Friday and Saturday. The conditions that we propose are largely the same as those that are already applied to our premises license, because we feel that those conditions are promoting the licensing objectives currently, and to use a rather colloquial phrase, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I'm fully aware, councillors, of the Royal Borough's policy in respect of premises after midnight. I can address you on that policy if you wish, or I can deal with it in questioning. But given that we already operate past midnight, I thought it better to hone in on the differences between our current licence and the application that we are making. I did want to point out to you as well that the hours that we are applying for have been carefully selected, carefully curated to assist with dispersal from the premises. What do I mean by that? Well, by shutting down the premises in phases, we ensure that there isn't an outflux of the entire capacity of the building in one go. That phased dispersal starts with the restaurant, which is the earliest part of the premises to close, and ends with the basement. And that restaurant closing first is a key part of the premises' dispersal strategy, because the area is used as part of that strategy. And I may ask Mr. Kraus in due course to explain to you specifically how that works, or you can ask that of him in questioning. What I would say is that my client takes extraordinary care to manage their dispersals, with customers effectively being escorted to their taxis or their cars. We're also not proposing any increase to the capacity of this premises. So this is not a case where we're asking for more people than we have previously. I thought you might want to hear about why we are making this application. So unless you've been under a rock, you can't have been insensible to the fact that the past 2 years have been horrendous for the hospitality industry. That's not to diminish anyone else's experience, but the hospitality industry has been one of the sectors that has suffered the most. My client's business has survived, but there is a significant black hole where 2 years of trade would have been, and the next few years are looking very rough indeed. Overheads are increasing exponentially, and you'll be aware of the energy price crisis and the rises to pricing in that sector. Staffing is a real issue, both in terms of cost and scarcity of staff. You may have seen business leaders saying that they're simply unable to get the staff that they need. And that is a problem we have also. Brexit and the pandemic have decimated the pool of people working in hospitality. What do I mean? Well, by way of example, the business used to operate 6 days a week, Tuesday to Sunday, but is currently only operating 5 days a week. And we have to carefully marshal our resources to ensure that our staff get enough hours so as not to become dissatisfied and move on to pastures new. But the problem is not all on the business side, it's on the consumer side also. There's a cost of living crisis, as you'll be aware, which means that customers have less available income, which makes them more selective about how and where they spend their money. That means we need to be able to compete with other premises, and having later hours helps encourage sales, not just in the additional hour that we're asking for, but also earlier in the evening. And that is because customers do look at whether they can go to a venue to enjoy a full evening without having to move between venues. And customer preference is for those venues that are able to do that. And you'll see that point made out very clearly in the letters of support that we submitted backing our application. I mentioned to you that...
Mr. Alford, 10 minutes goes very quickly. Are you quite close to finishing?
Relatively, sir. I will be just a couple of minutes more, if that's okay.
A couple more, yes, okay.
I mentioned to you that my client has spoken to the environmental health officer. One of the concerns that Mr. Mahaffey expressed to my client was that the license could be passed on to someone else. Ironically, sir, not obtaining the hours that we're seeking makes that more likely, not less. That would be a great shame and a huge loss to the community. I will let you ask my clients about their community endeavours, but they support a great number of those, including musicians and artists. Just in terms of the objections, I'll run through those very quickly. The planning objection is what it is, sir. It's a statement that the planning hours granted and the licensing hours matched up. You are vastly experienced committee members, so I don't need to dwell on the fact that you will have heard hundreds of times that planning and licensing are separate regimes. We're pleased that the planning officer has rowed back from their initial objection and some of the things that were said because they were incorrect. We don't accept that granting this license means that my client will automatically breach their planning permission. My client is fully aware of what their planning permission is and has no intention of doing that. And we also don't accept that the leap of logic we say that additional hours being granted automatically means there will be a public nuisance. As I've said, sir, there is only one resident objector, and my client has always been proactive in dealing with concerns of residents. I would say to you that 4 complaints about a premises that operates in the nighttime economy is a remarkably low number of complaints, and ask you to note that all of those complaints are no further action. My client always does their level best to manage everything, and it's a real team effort between the management, the staff, and the security team. There's huge number of people praising our dispersal procedures, and you'll see those in the letters of support. Have to mention the fact that the premises has contributed positively to crime and disorder in the area. The security, the CCTV coverage, and the sensitive lighting have also all contributed to a vast improvement in the locality. Mr. Mahaffey is very familiar with this premises and can tell you what it was like before my clients came along. In terms of Mr. Mahaffey's objection, he makes the point that he made back in 2017 about this being a reverberant area. I'm afraid, sir, there's nothing my clients can do about the streetscape, but I'm also bound to say that reverberant is a comment that can be passed about almost the entirety of London. What my client can control is how they manage noise and dispersal. And you see my client's security and dispersal policy in your papers. And if you'd like to ask Mr. Kraus about the specifics of that, I'm sure he'd be happy to answer. There's no suggestion from...
And you've now had an extra three minutes, Mr. Alford. Are you on your last sentence?
Virtually, sir. Two less than a minute.
Go on then.
There's no suggestion from Mr. Mahashi that dispersal is not well managed. And it's not a leap of faith, sir, to suggest that if we can manage dispersal well at 2 o'clock, we can manage it well at 3. I would be very surprised if there is any difference in noise terms between those two times in terms of background noise. So that, from me, is it. I'm mindful that I've spoken for some time, but I do invite you to grant this application. And if you have any questions of us, we'll be pleased to answer them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alford. I do have a list of questions, but perhaps I'll ask Councillor Benson to go first if he's got anything.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I'm getting some feedback. Right, okay. Thank you. Yeah, we might go back and forth on this. So, okay, so I'm curious when we talk about how it does a lot of good for the community, and I'm wondering exactly what you mean by that, because what I'm seeing on the list of supporters is that they're all people that drink in the club. And then there's something tacked on about, well, it's really good for the community. I obviously don't know who these people are, but I do know that they're obviously patrons of the business already. And there's sort of, there's sort of talk of that and talk about how it's it's improved crime statistics or whatever. Can you actually give me some evidence of that, what you're actually talking about? Because that's a bit of a vague, nebulous phrase. When people talk about community around here, that's also a very sort of malleable term, I'm finding. If you don't mind speaking a bit about that.
Yeah, sure. Because of the time constraints upon me, I had to gloss over a fair amount of my submissions. I thank you very much for allowing me a little bit of extra time. I was going to talk about the specifics of some of the things that my clients have done in the community, but perhaps rather than that, it's better for me to hand over to Mr. Fustock, who can explain the very specifics of that and how he is part of the community, has been part of the community for a very long time, and some of the endeavours like the meals that are provided during COVID, the fact that crime has massively diminished around the premises, as borne out by the lack of police objection, who objected to the original application. Taz, would you very kindly tell the councillors about some of your charitable endeavours?
Yes, thank you, Luke. And so I believe that any establishment, if you're not giving back, if you're not helping the area, then you're taking from the area. So from the very beginning, we put £1 on all of our bills. It's optional, but no one ever removes it. And we give to Goldfinger Factory and the Portobello Rugby Trust. That is, always good, a financial donation, but we also, Goldfinger, we give them many different jobs and help with the People's Kitchen they do every week by sending staff over. During the pandemic, Jonathan as well, who could tell you more because he was actually in cooking with them, although he's the general manager, he ended up actually getting, rolling his sleeves up and actually helping out. So there are numerous different charity events we do throughout the year, whether it's fundraising for the pantomime, helping for that. I was just this morning on a phone call for an orphanage that we want to do some fundraisers for at the beginning of the year. There's a constant flow of giving back to the area and to the people that need. In a beautiful world, and I was just saying, if every restaurant put £1 on all of their bills, there would be virtually no issues anymore and just gave it to charity. It's such a simple mechanism. But then on top of that, as far as reducing crime, so Jonathan's always at the forefront of this, but many times the police have come to ask us to help with some issues that have happened around the area. And because there's people there and because there's a presence, we want to have CCTV footage of any issues that may happen that we give to the officers, but also just by the nature of being there means that there's less crime that happens. I mean, I've grown up in this area forever. The local councillor, Pat Mason, has known me for years, and we've been, he originally helped fight this, and then he switched his opinion and said, you know what, there's no one better for this than to actually run this place, because that area specifically, there was little knife and drug stashes in the parks around. There would be all the local kids that would hang around. I mean, even building it, I remember being on the construction site. It was raided 3 times by local kids that would just form little, mischievous groups of youths. That all has disappeared since we've been just by the nature of having an establishment. What else? Charity side, the helping the police side, as an ongoing effort for the area. So there's resident committees locally that I used to sit on. Now Jonathan sits on some of them more than I do, but we're always there at the forefront to help anyone and anything that's needed in the area. I mean, I actually live just next to Colville, and I'm, that's why I was helping with the pantomime for the in the Tabernacle, which is just facing my house. So, yeah, I mean, I've lived here for 3 generations. I'm not an alien to this area. My mother went to Honor Park School. My grandmother had a tiny little house on St. Stephen's Gardens. So I'm very much here to improve the area and to be here for the locals should that you need anything at all. And all we've done is, in my opinion, improve people's lives and provide jobs. So it would be such a shame to have a curveball thrown by not being able to operate, to our full capacity. So thanks. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, okay, fine. Okay. No, I'll leave that for now.
Could I just add something, please?
Let me bring Mr. Strauss in there. I think he's got a point to add.
Hi, Mr. Benton. Just another point I'd like to make. There was an instance last year where one of the residents was causing a lot of grief to other residents by being extremely aggressive. One resident that is just opposite Lalo was actually being actively bullied by this person and was afraid to leave her house to go shopping and all the rest of it. The person in question who was causing all of this grief was also giving us an amount of grief by being pretty dismissive of the staff and pretty rude, and in fact, insulting them in various ways. I helped the lady who was being bullied, as well as a few other residents, in notifying the local authorities whenever this person was causing a nuisance. And as a result of the work that we did together, we managed to get this person removed from the area. Over the last 6+ years, we've built a fairly decent relationship with a lot of the local residents, and they've come to us on several occasions to ask us for help in some of these matters, because we have become a pillar of that community. The Trellick Square area is a very small area where, considering how present we are, we always bump into each other and see each other. And we're always happy to extend a helping hand to any residents with any concerns that they have. I just wanted to point out that as an example, a specific example of something that we've done to help the community in the previous years. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So what I'm hearing is no statistics on crime, and that you got a local resident kicked out of the area.
No statistics on crime. Well, we can tell you how many times we've given police officers CCTV footage. We'd have to look that up.
But as an improvement, as a substantive improvement on the area.
I don't have the figures now, but I mean,
I don't expect everyone to have all the figures all the time. I just want to know if there are any. Then let me know. That's all I'm asking. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Yeah,
Councillor, we don't have the crime figures, but what I would say is that the proof really is in the pudding with this premises. That before we came to Lalo, the area around this premises was blighted with with drug and knife crime, and we have been a positive improvement on the area. I mean, if you wish to ask Mr. Mahaffey, he can tell you what this premises was like versus what it is like currently.
Well, I appreciate that, but I've actually lived here long before Lalo's been in there, so it's really, so I'm just asking for evidence of it. If you just tell me that it's improved, that's fine. But I've got nothing. I've got no evidence of it. That's all I'm saying. I'm either going to take your word for it or I'm not.
So I would like to just comment is that I would believe the police would have objected had there been an increase in crime.
Yes.
Right. So you're saying there probably wasn't an increase, which isn't the same. You're saying there's definitely a decrease. I'm just sorry. I'm getting some feedback from somewhere. It's a bit off-putting. So that's all I'm saying. Like, maybe you're right. I'm just saying that you're making a statement that crime has improved, and I'm not seeing the evidence for it. And so I'm not trying to bring my own experience into it. In the absence of any evidence, it's just that's all I'm saying. If you don't have it, you don't have it. That's fine.
I agree, and I'm very happy to go and speak to officers and try and get some statements to help justify and prove this point. If that's
I mean, there's also the issue. This is a very heavily policed area in terms of stop and search, and how that affects residents negatively. So it's not a blanket positive that police take that kind of interest in an area like this, which is very underserved, very underprivileged area. But I do appreciate all that you're saying, and I don't want you to think I'm trying to have a go. I just want, if there is substantive evidence, I want it. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. I agree, and I'm happy to look into it further and get some statistics if you would like me to do that.
I don't think we can take that during the hearing because I suspect we wouldn't be able to get the answer during the hearing. Councillor Benson, did you have any further questions you wanted to ask?
No, not for now. I think it'll all come up elsewhere in the hearing. Thank you.
Jolly good. All right. Well, let me ask a few then. Mr. Elford, you gave us an opportunity to ask you about the midnight policy, and perhaps you can talk to us about that in a little bit more detail.
Yes. So, in terms of your policy, sir, back in 2017, the committee recognised that this premises was an exception to that policy. For all the same reasons expressed in 2017, we say that we are still an exception to that policy, and that the management procedures and roles that we have in place, the security, the positive benefits that we've brought to the area, we say that we continue to be an exception to your midnight policy, and that we ask you to find the same as your predecessors did in 2017.
Okay, thanks very much. And you also seem quite keen for us to ask you a question to expand on the dispersal policy. So perhaps I can pick up that baton and ask you to expand, please.
Sure, thank you. So my clients are very mindful of dispersal from this premises, and perhaps at this stage the best thing for me to do is bring in Mr. Kraus, who can talk you through how the premises disperses and the specific measures that are in place to promote the public nuisance licensing objective and how it's managed from an operational point of view. So, Johnny, would you mind telling the councillors about the dispersal from the premises and how it's done in phases and how it's managed by you to ensure that there is no public nuisance, and what you do specifically?
Certainly. Just to preface my comments, I'd like to point out a few things. First and foremost is that whilst staff retention in hospitality is usually quite low and there's a pretty big turnaround, a lot of our employees have actually worked with us almost since day one. Specifically, 2 employees who are responsible for the dispersal policy and for hosting in general have been with us since 2017. So they're extremely familiar, not only with the premises, but with the local challenges that we face. The other thing is that obviously after the pandemic, when the streets were extremely quiet, when we reopened up, I think the local residents had gotten used to just, you know, the dead quiet that was no cars, no transport, no venues open of any kind. And as a result of that, we felt that when we reopened, we had to be extra careful in terms of how we managed our dispersal. And that's when we kind of engineered this methodology of using our restaurant as a holding area. The logic behind that was that people inside a soundproof building will obviously cause less nuisance than outside. And so what we put in place is a system whereby from the hours of midnight onwards, we position staff at various key locations within the premises and start diverting people towards the restaurant, inviting them to sit down, have a glass of water, and order their cabs inside. We then place security on the doors of the restaurant, and we're kind of inviting people to show us that their Ubers are waiting outside. And then we've also got security outside the premises to escort people from the doors to their taxi, and also make sure that anyone who's walking home is doing so quickly and quietly. And the difference has been really noticeable in the sense that once we didn't have major issues before, suddenly we found ourselves with very quiet streets during the closing period. And whilst initially there was a lot of communication that had to happen, the benefit of being a members club is that it's a lot of regular guests who are now familiar with the process, and know that they finish their drinks, they come upstairs with their coats, sit down, especially during the winter months. It's a lot easier to do because it's obviously cold outside. They'll wait for their taxi and then walk out, jump into the taxi and drive off. It alleviates the kind of conversations that patrons could have outside as to where they're going next and what are they doing afterwards. Those conversations are held inside a soundproof venue. And as a result of that, I think there's been a huge reduction in noise in general. And we obviously intend to keep that process, and we're constantly reviewing how we can improve it moving forward.
Thank you, Mr. Krause. That was very helpful. Now, you referred to the members club, and it brings me to a question raised by the objector, or by Mr. Page on the objector's behalf. She's wondering, this is the second paragraph of her objection, so I'll ask you, what are the membership fees, how many founder members, how many honorary members there are? Perhaps you can address those questions, please.
Certainly. Membership varies depending on your age group, between about £500 a month to, £500 a year to about £800 a year. And the total memberships of LELO currently stand at about 850.
Thank you very much. And then on the planning, you've addressed that, Mr. Elford, at some length, but could you confirm for me that you're currently operating in accordance with your current planning permissions, please?
Yes, absolutely, sir. And also we have submitted now a planning application to dovetail the licensing and the planning hours.
Thank you. So I'm just taking notes here, bear with me. Right, last one. Could we turn to the noise complaints, please, which are on different pages on the different documents. So I've got the old one in front of me. Can you say a bit? Perhaps we could have them up on the screen, please, from the governance team. And could I ask the objectors to say a bit more about what happened with the noise complaints?
Yes. So I've been through these complaints with my client. The first one was actually nothing to do with customers or anything. A fan, an extractor fan, was broken and was creating a noise. It was attended to as soon as it was noticed and brought up. My client liaised with the resident throughout the process, explaining the lead times for getting the new fan, installing the new fan, and they seemed very happy in correspondence with my client that they were doing everything they can. Can't really say a great deal about the second one, other than that COVID rules were followed at this premises, and my client took all of the necessary steps that were envisaged both by the government in legislation and in guidance. loud music from cars, so can't be sure that that these were cars at Lalo and not just cars passing by. I'd also ask you to note the complaint summary, which confirms that there was a temporary event notice in place. And the final one, about music, my client liaises very closely with any residents. There's also a condition that we have to hold residents meetings to discuss any issues. I would say, sir, that during the pandemic we weren't able to hold those meetings, but we are starting them back up again. Johnny, Taz, anything else on those complaints?
No, not from me.
Thanks very much indeed. Councillor Benton, anything arising from my questions before I move on to others?
Sorry, there is one more comment about the complaint.
Go for it.
When you say that loud music is coming from the premises, I specifically spent a vast amount of money soundproofing it, so I find it hard to actually see that as something with any fact or anything proven. It's just speculation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fustott. We've noted that. Councillor Benton, did you have any further questions following up mine?
Just to, if you want to answer it, it's not a huge deal. I mean, I will say I've not noticed noise when I've walked past it. Like I think there has been a lot of money spent on soundproofing. I'll certainly give you that. Yeah, I mean, just that there's a slight contradiction saying that people are coming to the area and playing loud music, but it's not for Lalo, but also Lalo have managed to make a positive contribution to the environment. I mean, but at the same time, it's one complaint over 2 years. So just to point out that it's either having that effect or it isn't. If I'm missing something in that, then just please tell me. That's fine with it.
I mean, those are all factors that we'll deliberate on, but perhaps Mr. Elford would like to, if I turn that into a question, Mr. Elford can comment on those thoughts.
Just so that this wasn't a complaint that was raised with my client at the time. It could conceivably be a car driving past playing music rather than anything emanating from my client's premises. We simply don't have enough detail, and you're going to hear from Mr. Mahaffey about noise and this premises, and also the other point that Councillor Hammond very sensibly raised about, and you raised about the noise attenuation measures that have taken place at this premises. The basement is effectively an acoustic box that sound cannot escape from. A huge amount of money was spent on that. All of these complaints are recorded as no further action. It really is difficult for us to offer any sort of accurate observations. We've checked back through our records and we don't have, other than the fan and of course the temporary event notice, we don't have any information about these particular complaints.
Thanks very much. Now let me ask Mr. Mazurier, our legal advisor, if she has any questions.
No, not any specific questions. I just wanted to clarify on each of the floors, the basement is still a live music venue, existing and proposed. The ground floor is still a restaurant, existing and proposed. Can you just clarify what's happening on the first floor and the second floor, existing and proposed, just for clarity, please?
The first, in terms of hours, or in terms of what they are, or
activities, just what they are, not hours.
So in terms of the existing license on the first floor, currently there is recorded music, late night refreshment and sale of alcohol, and that is not changing.
Is that private members? Is it used as a bar upstairs? Or
yeah,
lounge?
it's a members bar.
It's a members bar, and so currently the basement is members only.
Yes.
On the ground floor, the restaurant's open to the public. Is that correct?
It is. Yes. Yeah.
And currently the first floor and the second floor, are they members only?
The first floor is members only. The second floor is used as a private dining room, so it can be hired out.
Okay.
And we don't distinguish between members and members of the public in terms of the second floor, although it's very sparingly used. We can only use it a certain number of times per year, and it's only really for VIPs because it is expensive to hire.
Okay, so in terms of the basement with this application, you're seeking to is it non-members you're seeking, or people who bought tickets you're seeking to add that to? Yeah.
Yes, we would like to be able to offer tickets to people to come to the basement. That's something that we would like to do, to be able to have people come and see the live music that we have. One of the things that I didn't really get a chance to mention was the music work that my clients do in the local community. They operate a program for budding musicians whereby they afford them sound recording, rehearsal space, and help with those things at their own expense. And you know, my clients have promoted local acts. Celeste, who has gone on to win a Brit Award and be nominated for an Oscar and a Golden Globe for her music, was one of the artists that we supported at this premises. So that's another example of a positive impact that we've had.
Thank you. And just one final question: the external area, you use that in conjunction with the restaurant for dining and smokers?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's so the restaurant area is used for dining only, and I think the current permission is that we can use it until 10:30 p.m. Although we actually only use it until 10 because we're mindful of our surroundings. After that, it is just smokers that use that area, and we have a limit on the number of smokers that we can have, which is 10 people, and we stick to that rigorously.
And that area forms part of the private land. You don't need a pavement licence for that area where
it's part of our land. Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions. Thank you very much.
We do have a pavement licence for our tables and chairs.
Okay.
Sorry, where on the next to the main entrance or elsewhere?
No, on the front side of the building, so the south facing side.
All right, so you've got a T&C, it's a pavement licence, so front side. Okay, that's interesting. And how many tables and chairs is that for, out of interest?
Off the top of my head, I think it's 6 tables and 20 chairs, I believe, off the top of my head.
And are they rendered unusable at a certain time of night? So absolutely. I think with your dining, you said 10:30 p.m. or 10 p.m. you bring them in. Presumably there's a time limit as well. Okay, lovely. That's great. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. We're now on questions from the responsible authorities. Ms. Wilson, anything from you?
Nothing from me, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mahaffey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of questions. Basically, I'm a little confused with something in the application, because each part of the premises has got hours at which it is open to the premises. And basically, we have a condition on the licence that the premises shall close and all customers shall be off the premises 30 minutes after the terminal hour for the sale by retail of alcohol on the premises. Now, it basically means that on the ground floor, everybody should be off the ground floor by midnight. But basically, we're saying that as part of the overall dispersal policies for the premises, that they're going to use that people will be going onto the premises before the premises closes, and that could be up to 3 a.m. or just after 3 a.m. in the premises. Is it something which I just could have a little bit of clarification on about how that actually legally would affect the operation of the business if there is no if those parts of the premises are meant to be closed?
It's a case of keeping people indoors so that we're keeping the possibility of disturbance to an absolute minimum. I think it would be very incongruous to the promoting the licensing objectives to say that it would be better for us to throw those people out onto the street.
No, I totally agree with you, but I'm just looking at the enforceability and making sure that that condition is complied with. Because if that condition can't be complied with through for the external dispersal perspective, then we maybe have to look at that condition as such when it comes to the discussion of conditions at the end of the hearing. But I just really want, if it says the premises that all customers shall be off the premises, then it should mean that after 30 minutes, then that area should be closed. I'm just wondering about the enforceability of that. But if there is concerns, if there is issues with that, that's something which we can get a bit of advice on. The second thing I'd like to just discuss with is the difference between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. Would you not agree with me that residents sleeping between 2 and 3 in the morning, if you're walking between up to 2 a.m. in the morning, you know that you can sleep. But if you know that it's going to be 3 a.m., it's going to have a greater impact on residents who are disturbed by the operation of the premises up to 3 a.m. in the morning. That if the external management is not of a good standard, that we would have a lot of residents very severely impacted by this later operation to 3 a.m. in the morning.
I think there's 2 points there, Keith. I think the first point is that the external management is of a very high standard. I'm sure you would agree with that. The second point is I don't agree that there is a practical difference between disturbing people at 2 a.m. and disturbing people at 3 a.m. We don't want to disturb people at any time of night, be that 11, 12, 1, 2 or 3. And everything that my clients do is geared towards that. I don't think there is a practical difference. I disagree with that, I'm afraid.
Right. Well, I think we'll have a difference of opinion there, and I'll explain my thoughts when it comes to my submission. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Mahaffey. I would ask Mr. Page if he has any questions at this stage, but no, his microphone isn't working. But if he does, he can text them through to Anne, and as long as the hearing's still running, I will be happy for those questions to be put to the applicant at a later stage. So we're now turning to the responsible authorities to make their case. I'm going to start with planning. Ms. Wilson, you have up to, well, in fact, 14 minutes to make your case, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I won't dwell too much on what I've already commented, but planning permission was granted in 2015 and the hours condition was varied in 2020 following the receipt of a complaint from a neighbour that they were occasionally disturbed late at night, along with a few other conditions that were questionably in breach. So we invited an application to vary the condition so that the planning and the licensing matched at the time. So this was approved in 2020. The result is that we've got a terminal hour of 1 a.m. Monday to Thursday. Friday and Saturday there was an error in the wording of the condition, and we've currently got a non-material amendment submitted to vary it to be 2. So we're treating this as 2 because it was an error in the wording, and Sunday is midnight. Following my objection the first time, we've opened up a dialogue with the applicants, spoke to them a couple of weeks ago, and they said that an application to vary the condition vary the planning condition to meet this proposal in the licensing application today will be submitted. To date, we've got no application. It's not on the system yet. If it has been submitted, it must have been in the last few days, just waiting to be on the system. In the absence of a varied planning application and the opportunity for public consultation and the planning officer's full considerations, I'm concerned that the later hours don't comply with our local plan policy. That's the L5 for living conditions, and that requires applicants to take into account the prevailing characteristics of the area. I'm a bit aware that this application results in discrepancies, so it means that the basement Thursday, Friday and Saturday nights would exceed the planning. That's 3 a.m. Fridays and Saturdays. First floor would be Thursdays, it would exceed it, and second floor, I'm a bit questionable about the second floor. In terms of planning, it's a bit questionable because it should be residential. So although I accept the applicant's feedback that it will be rarely used throughout the year as a private members club. It's a bit questionable how rare that will be used. But yeah, it's just because it's a mixed-use area. I know there's a lot of residential around in Golborne Gardens, Hazelwood Avenue, Trellick, and I'm concerned that if we were to receive a planning application for the later terminal hours, I'm not sure that it would be policy compliant. I think it would be contrary to policy. I think it would be likely receive quite a lot of objections, and we would likely refuse it. So yeah, that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wilson. Well, one question for you from me, first of all. We heard earlier that the applicants confirmed that they were operating their current licence in accordance also with their current planning permission, and do you agree with that? Apart from the, I think you had a non-material amendment for some kind of error there, but broadly, do you agree with that?
Yeah, we haven't received any recent complaints.
Thanks very much indeed. And I have my next question is for the legal advisor. I think we heard earlier from the applicant discussion about planning and licensing being a separate or separate regimes. Can we put on record your advice on that, and also confirmation that the a premises needs to operate in accordance with the more restrictive of the two regimes if there's a difference between planning and licensing permissions?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, they are entirely separate regimes, and you can grant a licence which doesn't marry up with the planning regime, although I understand an application will be submitted. Obviously, if they don't subsequently get the planning permission, which would tie in with the licensing hours, that would be a breach of planning legislation, and the planning department could take enforcement action under the planning regime, but they are entirely separate, so they don't have to marry up, but they don't have to be in compliance with the licensing regime.
Okay, thanks very much indeed. Councillor Benson, do you have any questions for planning?
No, thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much. Now I'm going to ask, I can see there's a hand up from Mr. Elford, but I've got Mr. Le Mesurier first of all, if you've got any questions for planning.
No questions from me, thank you, Chair.
Okay, Mr. Elford, do you have any questions for planning?
It was more a point, sir, that I couldn't see.
We'll turn it into a question, please.
Could the officer take me to the part of her representation that mentions this complaint?
Ms. Wilson. Yeah, it's not in there. It's just a bit of background to why the hours were varied in 2020.
Okay, the panel has noted that that point and the lack of evidence. Any other questions, Mr. Elford?
It was only to say that a planning application has definitely been submitted. I can't answer for why it's not been found, but I would point out that the last time that the register was checked the first time, mistakes were made.
What do you know when it was submitted, Mr. Elford?
I would have to go back through my emails, sir, but it was quite a little while ago now, several weeks at least. It may be that for some reason or another it's not been validated. I'm sorry to say I'm not a planning specialist, and it wasn't submitted by me. It was submitted by Bidwells.
Okay, well we'll park that point because it's not really a licensing matter. And once again, if you don't have any further questions, I'm going to say to Mr. Page, if he has any questions for planning, same rules, he can text them through to Anne, and if the hearing's still ongoing, I will be happy to put those questions on your behalf to the responsible authority. And so we'll turn to the second responsible authority, Mr. Mahaffey. You've got up to 14 minutes now to make your case.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'll try and do it in a lot shorter period. Clearly, my comments are about previous issues with the premises. I don't wish them to be reflected on the current operators of the premises. I have nothing but a lot of respect for them because they are managing the premises well. So I think it's better to clarify that at the beginning. But clearly, my concerns basically here is where the premises are located is in a very reverberant area. And it has a lot of hard surfaces, a lot of residential properties around it. We have bedrooms overlooking the street. This was very evident when the premises was operated by a not very well managed operator in around about 2013, and basically created major problems to a lot of residents. The whole issue here is not the building. The building is done to a very high acoustic standard, and I have no issues with what has been done in it. It's purely the external management that is the problem. If it is not of a good standard, then we have a major problem. If it is of a very good standard, then we are in the position we're in at the moment, where we are looking at a premises which can operate and can operate efficiently within the premises without causing promoting all four licensing objectives. Now, I'll give you a little bit of history. When the premises was originally operated, we had a nice partnership who came in. They redeveloped the premises, and they operated it for a number of years, and there wasn't a problem with it. We had absolutely no issues with the premises. He then decided to move on to another premises, and somebody else moved in, and basically all hell was let loose. We had major problems with noise from people being disturbed in Trellick Tower and in the surrounding area. And it basically all came down to the way in which he managed people. Now, I fully agree with Mr. Elford that the best way of dealing with this, with the external management, is keep the people inside. And if you keep the people inside, they can trickle out into their Ubers and they can walk away and they can leave the premises. But if you don't have those proper measures in place, then you're going to have all the problems. People standing outside saying goodbyes, getting into their cars, going around the corner, and then playing a bit of music as they leave. And this is the issue. It is a premises in a very densely populated area. If there is not good management at all times, then we are going to have a problem. And that's the concern I have with this application. Clearly, I feel that 3 a.m., and I very much have a different opinion with Mr. Elford on this. 3 a.m. is if the management of the premises is poor, at 3 a.m. Being kept up to 3 a.m. in the morning is going to have a greater impact on residents than being kept up to 2 a.m. And I feel that 3 a.m. for the area is excessively late, considering everything, all the potential for problems here. And in those circumstances, I personally feel that if this license was granted to 3 a.m., if we had a bad operator or the external management is not good, we're going to have a major problem because so many people can be affected by it. And that's a concern really I wanted to bring to this committee.
Thank you, Mr. Mahaffey. One might think that some of the things you've said have been sort of historical, and you've actually been very complimentary about this management, and this is the management that's applying for the license. Why should they be penalised by a theoretical possibility? What do you say about that?
Well, the situation is if it goes later and they don't maintain this good management, these are the circumstances that we will have to deal with, and clearly that is. Premises can change hands, and it's not all operators will operate in the manner in which these operators operate. And licenses are in perpetuity, and as they're in perpetuity, we don't know what's going to happen. And clearly, I personally feel, or professionally feel, that 3 a.m. for this location is it's an unnecessary lateness that could give rise to a very severe problem.
Would you also agree that licenses can be reviewed if there's a problem?
Yes, but licenses being reviewed is not something which happens. It's not an immediate result. You have to build up the picture. You have a full process to go through. Then you have the appeals process to go through. You know, we're talking about a 12 to 15 month period between complaints coming in for a review to be considered and an actual decision being made in the magistrate's court. It's and in that time the premises can operate under their existing license and the problem can continue.
Okay, so we've had. I mean, I completely accept that you've given us your professional judgment, but the evidence doesn't seem to back it up. You know, we've got one complaint and we read it very carefully, but it's only one, and there's only 4 noise complaints.
But it's not testament to say that I accept it's testament that their management process are working. But at the end of the day, the potential is that 3 a.m. in the morning is going to be a greater degree of disturbance and intrusion and inconvenience to residents in that area. So clearly what they have, I have no issues with the 2 a.m. they have at the moment, but I consider it to be the optimum hours for that location.
I see. Okay, thank you. Let me ask Councillor Benton if he's got any questions for noise and nuisance.
No, thank you, Chair. I think we've covered it.
Okay, thanks very much. Let me just think about a final one from me, Mr. Mahaffey. Bear with me a moment. Yes, it's perhaps on the conditions and the use of the ground floor as a holding area after its terminal hour. Is that something that you think could be addressed by the wording in the conditions?
Well, it's something which I wouldn't mind Ms. Mesurier basically giving us an opinion on, for the simple reason that if it has to be cleared as part of the condition, then basically we can't then let it be filled again with people on the premises, which could, if that condition was on, we could be looking at breaching that condition. So we need to be careful with how we word it, so that if this is part of the external management processes, that the conditions will reflect what is appropriate for the premises.
Okay, thanks. Well, we will have that discussion without prejudice to the committee's overall decision. Mr. Mesurier, do you have any questions for noise and nuisance?
No questions for noise nuisance. I can address that proposed condition 55 when we come to the condition session anyway. Thank you.
Okay, very good. So Mr. Elford, any questions for you for noise and nuisance? I see one of your clients has their hand up, but Mr. Elford, you'd like to lead us through your team's questions.
Thank you. So I was just going to ask Mr. Mahaffey if he recalls what he said the optimum hour for this premises was in 2017.
I can't.
It was midnight 30. And Mr. Mahaffey, would you say that my client is a good operator and has good procedures for external management?
I don't have any issues with your client. They are responsible operators, and if they manage the premises in the manner in which they continue to do, or continue to manage the premises in the way they have been doing, then I would consider them to be a good operator.
Excellent. And if my client are good operators at 2 a.m., would they be good operators at 3 a.m.?
Sir, I still take the view that the circumstances change at 3 a.m. irrespective of what your client management processes are. Potential for a disturbance is much greater at 3 a.m. than what it is at 2 a.m.
Would you answer my question, please, which is, if my client is a good operator at 2 a.m., would they be a good operator at 3 a.m.?
Well, I think they would be doing their best, but I don't feel I still feel it's too late.
I don't have any further questions. Taz, do you still wish to speak?
It has to be a question, Mr. Fustott, though.
It has to be. Oh no, it was just more to speak to Keith, but no, it's not a question. So no. Maybe to explain to Keith, I can make it as a question. can't make it as a question. I was going to say I'm going to be here for a very long time. I'm not running away anywhere. I own the premises and I'm lived in the area for generations. There won't be another operator in your lifetime, Keith. I promise you.
Well, that's not a very long period.
Well, hopefully for the next 30 years, I can have a lovely neighbourhood restaurant at least.
Right. Thank you for that. I think we got the point, and we need to move on. Ms. Wilson, do you have any questions for noise and nuisance?
None from me, thank you.
All right. Once again, to Mr. Page, if there are any questions for noise and nuisance, you're welcome to text them through to Anne. And it would now be your turn to make an oral submission, but I know you can't. And I can assure you that we've read Ms. Hayes's objection very carefully, and we'll take it into account when it comes to the deliberations. So that brings us to the end of the evidence session, but I'm going to ask Mr. Mazire now to run through the potential list of conditions for this licence, particularly for those listening who, Mr. Wright.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I do have some questions that have come through.
Okay.
From Mr. Page.
Okay.
If you'd like, I can just put them to the applicant if you're happy with that procedurally.
Are they all questions for the applicant?
Yes, they will be.
All right. So let's run through those one by one then, please.
Sure, no problem.
We get them out.
The first question was that they had no knowledge of the community kitchen at Goldfinger Kitchen. Could they please provide more details of that?
Of course. Taz, Johnny, which one of you is better to answer that?
I'd be happy to. I was involved in all of this. So People's Kitchen is an organisation started by Goldfinger Factory, which is just across the road from us. During even pre-pandemic, they've been delivering food to local residents who have mobility issues, and during the actual pandemic, there was shielding. Whilst we were in lockdowns, we offered People's Kitchen to help and provided over 5,000 meals throughout the several months of lockdown. Myself and the team would come in, cook a meal, and then the food would be boxed up, and people who help People's Kitchen would come and deliver the food straight to the people's doors.
Sorry,
Thank you. Next.
Just to add, Goldfinger Factory is a charitable organisation, and they approached me when I was doing lots of charity work when they started as well. So it's like an ongoing relationship we have them to improve the services for anyone in need in the area.
The second question I have is about the pantomime, and Mr. Page is saying that him and Ms. Hayes don't have any knowledge of the pantomime. Could further details be provided?
Well,
we give away dinners and put up ads to help raise money for the pantomime, and we what was the last one we did? We've done a few now. Can't remember now, but basically to raise. We put up an ad in the back of their book saying if they raise money that they raise for the pantomime, they get free dinners with us. So essentially, we offer free dinners at later, free experiences in order to help the fundraise. And we do that with other things. That's just an example of a close one. We do things with things further out. We do a lot with Portobello Rugby Trust as well. But yeah, okay.
Very tempted to say, "Oh no, you didn't."
The third question I have is about, you mentioned sitting on residence committees. They would just like more details of that. I think, was that John?
John's on them recently. John, what was happening in the most recent ones?
The last one, I haven't been to one in the last few months. But we are holding our own early January with the head of all the local resident associations.
I'm sorry, I'm the head of a local resident association. I've not got an invite.
No, we haven't sent them out yet, but we'll be sending them out first week of December, and the meeting will be held on the 28th of January at 4 p.m. in Laylo.
Okay, thanks for that. So any further questions, Anne, from Mr.
Sorry,
Page?
one more thing. Cynthia Dyes, I've worked with for many years. Well, not worked with, but been on committees with for many years with the Goulburn Forum. And I was treasurer for a moment for the Goulburn Forum for, I don't know, probably, different positions, I'd say for 4 or 5 years while I was running the end of the Portobello Road Market for the council and raising money for various charities through the markets. So, yeah, I don't know if you know Cynthia Dyes, but she'll definitely vouch for any good work that we do in the area.
We are sent all the minutes of Cynthia's meetings and go through them systematically.
But the Goulburn Forum is the one that I've sat on for many years.
Sorry, there are questions coming through as I'm speaking, so I'm just trying to catch up with everything.
Okay.
In terms of, you were mentioning the Goulburn Forum, the question is, when was your last attendance at the Goulburn Forum or a local residents forum?
So Johnny was the last one. I sort of handed it over to him when I mean, I'm looking at the minutes now, the last one she sent me, but I wasn't at that one. That was on the 11th, 21st of the 11th, 22.
I'm looking through my calendar now. I think the last one I attended was pre-pandemic.
Okay, thank you. That's been noted. And then, sorry, just to go back to the pantomime, they just want to know which pantomime you're actually speaking about, if you're raising money for it.
So it's Neville Hyde. He is a local character, and it's in the Tabernacle, and it's every Christmas. And yeah, I'll find you the ad that we put up for them.
I think you're talking
that's helpful advice about the
you're talking about the Portobello Panto.
Yeah, I think this is straying slightly beyond the remit of licensing now. So can I just pause for a moment? I think we've lost Councillor Benson. I think he's
okay.
No, he's back.
Sorry,
right.
Closing a window. There's a lot of noise from next door. Just close the window.
Sure. Okay. Next, are there any more questions, Anne?
Yes, and the last one I have was, please provide numbers of founder members and honorary members. I assume that means numbers as in how many there are.
I think I asked that question, but was there anything different to say to the answer I gave earlier on?
I think we have a membership of 850. I'm not sure my clients would have the specific breakdown of that to hand right this second, but if it's crucial, we can happily provide that offline or later on.
It's useful background, but it's not crucial to granting the license or not. Right. Was that the end of the questions, Anne?
Yes, nothing else has come through since then.
All
so
right.
That's the end of my questions.
Thank you very much indeed. That's very helpful. Could we now move on to a look through the potential conditions, please? And I'll ask Ms. Le Mesurier to lead this.
Yes, certainly. I'm going to share those on the screen now, Chairman.
Thank you. And for those listening, this will be without prejudice to the committee's final decision on whether to grant or not grant the application. But we do need to go through the conditions now with primarily with the applicant. But anybody else can shout out if they have any observations. So, Ms. Le Mesurier, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So the draft suggested conditions were circulated to the parties last night. I think all the existing or conditions from the original licence were on there, slightly tweaked in conditions 2 and 8, which I've highlighted in yellow, and changes I've made or suggested are in red, and I've got some additional conditions. So I think we just need to focus on the ones where there's been changes, but if anybody's got anything generally to say, if they could pipe up, please. Condition 1, I'm not proposing any change. Condition 2 is obviously where they're seeking to make an amendment in relation to the basement area so as to allow persons with pre-booked tickets for the event. I don't have any comments on that. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8, I don't have any comments on. These are obviously from the existing licence. If we could skip to 13 to 15, I was just going to replace the existing conditions 13 to 15 with our current model condition.
Sorry, Lindsay, I do apologise. Can I just go back to 8, please?
Yes.
If we can just slide back, and thank you. The bit in yellow, is that the section that would potentially address Mr. Mahaffy's point that he very helpfully raised about use of the restaurant facility after its terminal hour?
Yes, and we can also tweak my proposed condition 55 as well to kind of add into that as well.
Okay, thanks very much. Perhaps you could move on to 13 to 15 and then ask Mr. Elford what you were going to ask him.
I was just going to ask him if he was happy with my revised condition in lieu of 13 to 15 on the old licence.
Yes, absolutely. We've got no problem with that. The only point I would make is that the signage point is a legal requirement, so it is technically a duplication of legislation. But it's your model condition and we have no problem with it.
Okay, thank you. 18, are you happy with the additional wording?
Quite content.
Yeah.
Would it help if I went through and just said?
If we just quickly go through the ones that I've probably done red wording on, just so that it's kind of on the screen, so to speak, so people who are watching the live stream can be aware. I don't have any issues with 19 to 24. I mean, obviously, this is the grant of a new licence. It's not a variation, but obviously the previous conditions are fine. 25, are you okay with?
Absolutely fine.
27?
27 in principle is fine. I have got one comment, which is that some musical instruments are not capable of being fed via a noise limiting device. Thinking of a tambourine or something. I'm sure it's not anything that's going to concern you particularly, and also that it's in the basement, which is an acoustic box. The only thing I would wish to add is something around live music capable of being routed via the noise limiter, so that we're not inadvertently in breach of anything.
Okay, so perhaps to add in the words "we're capable." Keith, do you have any comments on this?
That was the reason why we always had recorded music on the thing, because recorded music is something which can be limited. But when it comes to things like saxophones, things like that, they can't. But the building performance is very high here. And the building performance is very high, then clearly we're really looking at the nuisance condition that music should not create nuisance to residents. And that condition should be sufficient for the premises. You know, this is not a normal standard premises. This is one which I have no issues with the acoustic containment on. So I'm happy just to leave it at recorded music rather than anything else, because I don't think we can control live music in the way in which that condition is really wanted to be. Okay, so keep it as the original condition, you think, Ben? Yes. Thank you. That's helpful. All right, moving on. So I will then skip to 34.
Absolutely fine. No problem.
You're fine with that? That's great. And then moving down to 45, which is just tweaked, so it's a bit more in line with our current wording. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, we've got no problem with that.
Brilliant. Thank you. And then just moving on to my additional suggested conditions. You've indicated that if this licence were granted on acceptable terms to yourselves, you would be willing to surrender the existing licence. Are you happy with this condition? I think the premises are freehold, so I think the bit in square brackets isn't relevant, but I just wanted your comments on 54, please.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. We're happy to accept that, and the bit in square brackets would just need to be deleted.
Okay, thank you. 55, this is like the drinking up. I mean, obviously I can add in some wording so it kind of dovetails with condition 8 about use of the ground floor area, because I know you've got different closing times for different levels on the restaurant, so perhaps I can add in some wording which would just indicate that They have to stop drinking at the ground floor restaurant, but obviously they can be there for the dispersal issue if the councillors are minded to grant. So are you happy with that?
In premise, yes, I think you're quite right. We would need to make sure that the wording was correct. I just think from our point of view, just to be clear, those who are using the ground floor waiting for taxis are not consuming alcohol. If they are having a drink, it is just water and no licensable activities are taking place.
No, they're just going to be in situ just while they're waiting dispersal.
Yes.
Could I, sorry to bust in, could you also confirm that you can have and everybody be off the premises within 30 minutes, or is 30 minutes a little bit of an understatement of the dispersal hour timing?
I think if it's the alcohol time, which is half an hour before, it would need to be up to 60 minutes.
Is this for all? Is this just for the ground floor you're talking about now?
No. So if we're talking about the basement, the first or the second, 30 minutes after the last sale of alcohol in those areas will be clear completely. It's just the ground floor where people might be after 3 o'clock waiting for a taxi, and it just be waiting for a taxi, nothing more.
I would have issues with an hour for the simple reason that all that's doing is extending the use of the premises until 3:30 in the morning.
It's not use though, Keith. It's people. Yeah, but it's a very finely appointed bus stop.
There's still a noise from people departing, getting into the cars, taxis coming. I would prefer not to have 60 minutes in that condition.
What would you prefer? 30 minutes. So if the basement.
Well, I'd be happy to go to 40 minutes to give an extra 10 minutes for people to leave, but I would be very uncomfortable with an hour with 60 minutes.
45.
I mean, look, we're in your hands, councillors. We are to a certain extent at the whims of taxi companies and providers as to how quickly they can get to people. Our firm view is that it's much better that we keep people within the premises rather than put them out onto the streetscape to wait for their taxis. We would much rather do that. We think that is what promotes the public nuisance licensing objective rather than lengthening any particular process. You know, if you say to us that we have to get people out, we will do that, but we need to be clear about that.
Okay, so just to be clear, if the basement timings end at 3 p.m, you're saying that in relation to clearing the basement will be cleared within 30 minutes, but the customers will be removed to the ground floor area, and you're asking that in relation to those customers from the basement, you're asking for 45 minutes rather than the 30 minutes just for that. Is that what you're saying?
It's difficult because this condition is linked to the sale of alcohol, which is actually 2:30. So 45 minutes would be 3:15.
Okay.
I just think we just need to make sure that the wording is correct, and it recognises the possibility that people will wait for taxis within the ground floor area. There will be no licensable activities taking place. The premises will be closed. They are simply waiting because it is better that they wait inside than out on the street.
Okay, so we need to craft a condition accordingly depending on what times the councillors think appropriate. Thank you. Moving on to 56, are you okay with that?
It's not a problem, but we have no problem with that.
Okay, jolly good. 57, do you have a designated smoking area?
We do. It's Johnny, if we were able to call up the plans, are you able to sort of explain with reference to the plans where you site your smokers? It's just to the side of the entrance doors.
Correct. On the south-facing side of the building, between the two entrances and exits, and the area has an awning above it and is surrounded by planters, all of which kind of help alleviate some of the sound that could be generated from there. We're happy to designate it on the plans if you like.
Is that the external terrace you're talking about?
It's within the external terrace
It's part
area.
right adjacent to the south-facing wall.
Okay. So it'd be helpful if you could provide just mark it on a plan and just email that across. That would be helpful, please.
Of course, more than happy to. The only point we did want to make is we don't want to put our staff smokers and our customer smokers in the same place.
Okay, so where would the staff smoke?
Johnny?
They smoke just next to the bin area on the west side of the building.
Okay, thank you. It'd be helpful to have that marked as well, just so we know on the plan. Thank you. Okay, 58, you okay with that?
Yes,
Sorry,
no problem.
go back on the screen.
That's already done.
Lovely. I noticed you do obviously collections and deliveries. Are you okay with having a policy, this is another standard condition we have where there's like Deliveroo's, it's usually Deliveroo drivers that cause problems, which is why we asked for this condition.
We don't provide collection delivery as far as I'm aware, Johnny.
You've asked for late night refreshment indoors though, haven't you, to include takeaways and deliveries, I think you said on the application. Takeaways
yeah, maybe that was me being trying to cover all bases.
We don't do deliveries. We attempted it during the pandemic, but we stopped it, and we don't intend on starting it up anytime soon.
So you don't have couriers collecting food, and you don't have patrons coming to collect food like a takeaway?
No.
Okay, so it's purely late night refreshment indoors without that. Okay, that's interesting because I picked up on that point. Okay, so no takeaways or collections. Okay, so that's probably not applicable then, that condition. Thank you. 60.
That's absolutely fine. We do that anyway.
And 61, please.
61, and this was just to we do absolutely clean and make sure the outside of the premises is spick and span. Whether we should do that at 3 o'clock, 3:15 in the morning,
yeah,
I'm not sure that's such a good idea.
What timings do you suggest? Periodically throughout the day?
Sorry to jump in. Our cleaners usually start at 6 o'clock in the morning, and we can ask them to start with that job.
Okay. So would you be agreeable to a condition just to sweep the immediate vicinity, say 3 times throughout the day, just to keep it clean?
I was going to suggest something along the lines of that we'd ensure that the vicinity of the immediate vicinity of the premises is kept in a clean and tidy condition, and that any refuse that does accumulate is removed as soon as possible, or something like that. There is a form of wording I have somewhere. It was just my concern was just the fact that it was suggested that we should do this right at the very end, which is when we want to be causing as least disturbance as possible.
Well, that's a fair point. Okay, so you're happy to have some kind of litter condition, obviously not after close at 3 a.m.
Absolutely.
But obviously you're happy to keep the immediate vicinity clean and tidy at all times throughout the day. Okay, well I'll craft some kind of condition.
It's something we do already. The security is particularly briefed to pick up any kind of glass bottles. Obviously none that come from our premises, but just glass bottles that are lying around. And so that's something we do anyways. We're more than happy with that.
And can you just confirm it's already in a condition, because I think there was something in the complaints about bottles being put outside late at night, but I think there's an existing condition which limits no collection, no waste materials to be put outside between midnight or between 2300 and 7. Can you just confirm that you don't kind of put bottles outside between those times?
No, we don't.
Okay, that's fine. And does anybody else have any other conditions which you think should be added which have cropped up during the course of the hearing? Because I can't think of anything else to add, but if anybody else has got anything else, it'd be helpful at this stage. Nope. Okay. Thank you. That is it from me. Back to the chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lamaziri. Any overall points for you before we close?
No, I think that was it. I don't think there was any other points that you were considering temporary licenses or anything like that. I'm not sure what your thoughts were on that.
No, I mean, that's an interesting point. I mean, it didn't really arise during the hearing, but something perhaps Mr. Mahaffey might have raised if he wanted to, as to whether there a trial period would be a possibility. Mr. Mahaffey, do you have any comments on that?
My view has always been that this is too late for the location. At the end of the day, if you consider that you want to grant the hours between 2 and 3 on a trial basis for a period of time, then that is you have the ability to do that. But at the same time, I still take the view that 3 a.m. for this location is too late. But at the same time, I would like, if you do decide, I would love a clause in it to basically, if we have problems, to be able to cease the use between 2 and 3. And if not, then they can come back and reapply for the later hours.
Okay, let
Can
me
I
ask.
just interject here? Can I just interject?
Yeah,
I just need to make it clear that we can't impose this as a condition. The applicant would have to agree to this. It's not something we can impose. I just wanted to make that clear just before we continue this discussion.
Thank you. That's helpful, Mr. Lamassoure. But well, let me ask Mr. Alford what the question of a trial period. What do you say about that?
It's not something that I have discussed with my client, so I would need a little bit of time to take some instructions. I'm not entirely sure the legal mechanism exists to turn a full premises license into a time limited license. And the only other point I would make about it, we're not entirely adverse to it. The only other point I would make is that this license requires us to surrender our existing. Clearly, if this is to be time limited, we would not be able to do that.
Yes,
for you.
that's fair
We
enough.
would have to keep our existing
yeah.
license. But if you would like me to take more detailed instructions, sir, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, I think we'll have it is a good point. So let's have a pause in place, and you can have a phone. I guess you've got a means of communicating with your clients offline while we're sat here for a couple of minutes. You've gone on mute.
Sorry, my bad. I'll just take some very quick instructions.
Yeah,
Taz, and Johnny.
What's the proposed trial time?
So it would be a proposal to try this application, to grant it for a trial period to see if it works. That's the suggestion that
What trial period?
Usually 12 months, usually.
So let me. I'm sure Mr. Elford knows how these things work, but let me just pause that for a moment and let you have a private conversation with your clients, Mr. Elford, and we'll just stay here and wait for you to come back.
Thank you, sir. I'll be as quick as I can.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you so much for allowing us that brief amount of time, councillors. That was useful. I've spoken to my clients. Back in 2017, it was suggested that we should only operate until midnight 30 and that we should come back to you after a time and ask for later hours. We were granted later hours from the very beginning, and we feel that we have served our time proving that we can manage those hours and not cause problems and promote the licensing objectives. And we're going to ask you please to grant this as a permanent increase to our hours. And if if problems arise, which we say they absolutely will not, then there are mechanisms to stop us from utilising those hours. But we're going to ask respectfully for the hours to be permanent rather than on a time limited basis.
Mr. Alford, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to give us a full answer on that. Let me ask Mr. Phelan if there are any final matters from the licensing team before we close.
Nothing further from licensing. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much. Governance team, anything arisen from you during the hearing?
Nothing more from me, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much indeed, in which case the summary decision will be issued in writing within 5 working days of the close. The full determination will follow later, and that will trigger the start of the appeal period. The meeting is now closed. I'd like to thank everybody for their participation this morning and for assisting the committee. The live stream broadcast will now end. And is now exiting. And the decision makers will meet in the private room in, let's say, 5 minutes to allow leg stretch. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you
very much. Thank you, councillors, for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.